All right, here's the deal, stinkers. By that I mean you.
I don't want to put myself in the corner and pee.
Yeah. Hashtag facts, not folklore. But speaking of folklore, that might or might not be facts, I think a lot of people from a certain time frame in their youth were pretty familiar with this little book and its successors, which, let's face it, as this series went along, it got shittier, but whatever. It's not like this one's fantastic or anything, but there was something about it that kind of stood out in young minds everywhere, especially those that are morbidly inclined, as we are wont to be.
Also morbidly obese.
Hashtag super facts.
Oh, yeah.
And hashtag super fat. Anyway, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark is one of those books that's just popular and then kind of stayed in the zeitgeist ever since. In fact, at one point they re-released it with different art, and people were just like, "It's not happening.
Yeah.
Fix this right now." And I gotta stand by it, because one of the things that sticks out the most is the bizarre art by Stephen Gamble, which is, if we're being honest, kind of like the most disturbing thing in these books. Yeah. If we're just going to look at them objectively.
It's like the thing that stayed consistently good through all of them.
Yeah, because the stories, it got shittier as the books went along. That being said, these things were based on folkloric tales and urban legends, and they were kind of like a remixed by this character Alvin Schwartz, and they became something. They became something that stuck in people's heads. So it was only eventual that we would get a movie. It was bound to happen. The question was it going to be a cash grab, or was it going to be cool? Well, we watched it.
Yeah.
And it was, look, I'm going to be upright right here. I feel that Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark of the movie,
the hit film,
is a good movie. It's not a great movie. It's a good movie that honestly is disserviced by having to be linked to the stories.
Yeah.
And vice versa. I feel they could have made a good movie about these stories that was more loyal to the stories and the concepts of the stories, that would have been far better by being unattached to a plot line like the one in Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, the movie. So I think in the end, while we get a good movie, yeah, it's kind of hobbled by what it's attached to, what it has to serve. I'm going to have to say what it has to service. It kind of just jams things in there because it's required to, because it's Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. You know?
And even some of the stories that are in there, they're like changed and expanded.
This is another big problem with the movie. If you're not familiar with the series, then you're like, huh? I am, and even not, because it's been a long time since I read these things. I had to remember how some stuff went, and I was like, at the end, it was kind of like annoying because it really didn't have to do anything with that. So it was kind of like, all right, whatever. The monster looks cool. So that's what I mean, ultimately, you could have swapped out the creatures and the links to this book and the other books in the series to just something that fit that story more, and it would have been a good movie, a really good movie. As it stands, it's a fair, good movie that's fun to watch, but it's a little shaky, because I feel that people that are not familiar with this book, they're going to be like, we're supposed to know something here, and we're kind of not, What stands the strongest is the connective wraparound story. That stands on its own, and that's good.
I think the stories within are kind of unimportant, sadly.
Yeah, really.
They're just kind of like spooky things.
It's really about what you see. A little callback to the book visually, and but we'll talk about that in finer detail. This movie was brought to us by Guillermo del Toro as a producer, and he also conceptualized a story, that binds this thing together. And interestingly enough, the Dunstan and Melton, the guys that are responsible for movies like Feast and The Collector, and a lot of the later Saw entries, or not a lot of them, but a handful of the Saw entries, they were responsible for this as well, conceptually speaking, which it's kind of like out of their comfort zone, so that's kind of cool. With the Del Toro thing, you could see in the story where his influence lies, and it's mostly in the new stuff, in that wraparound story. Easily you can tell that. You know, we have a sympathetic monster in the end. Standard tropes. Also kind of setting this in the 60s at a particular moment in time that ties into the social, political landscape of that these characters are living in and how it affects them. That all works out and is very Del Toro-esque. So that's cool. As far as Andre Overdahl, who directed this, you can see his stamp on this as well. A lot of the visuals, a lot of the kind of atmosphere and all that stuff. But again, the strengths of that come mostly with the new stuff. You know, and he does direct some cool tense sequences when it comes to utilizing, and I'm just gonna say it like this, the imagery of this. So that's all very cool. Overdahl, of course, is responsible for two like kind of minted horror classics, Autopsy of Jane Doe and Troll Hunter. Very good movies. So this one, you could chalk it up as another cool little movie in his oeuvre. Do I think it's going to stand out? Already it doesn't compared to his other two. And you know, I'm going to assume he's going to do just as good as he did previous to this. Again, that sounds like I'm tearing it down, but it's an entertaining flick. But I do feel that this new story that they used to wrap around all this stuff and to bind it together, it's been done before. Like, just off the top of my head, The Ring. You know, it's the Ring story, only less serious and more...
There's also, if you want to go with the even less serious than that, there was a film similarities to the Goosebumps wraparound.
Big time. So, you know, there's nothing new being rolled out here, but that doesn't necessarily spell its doom. So let's talk about what we may or may not have liked in this. Well, give me something, man, anything. Oh, well, first of all, before we get there, would you recommend this movie to someone that's interested in watching it? Yes or no?
I think it depends. I think it's kind of like a good entry horror movie, I would say. If you're like a hardened horror fanatic, maybe not.
Yeah.
Because it is very light.
I'm going to mirror that. There's nothing wrong with not having an R rating. Don't get me wrong. That's not what we're saying.
And this is based on a kid's book.
So. Yeah, exactly. We're totally aware of that. And, you know, we like tons of movies that are horror that are really should just be like PG movies, you know, or R or PG-13. That's fine. That's not the issue. But you're right. You know, there's nothing new being offered here to a seasoned horror fan. So, and if you're interested in something like this being given life, you're not going to get that.
Not really.
Other than the visual spectrum, you're not going to get that at all. So, nothing new. Nothing loyal.
It's kind of interesting because even the monster that gets the most screen time, which is that crooked dude, he's not even in the book. He was created for the movie.
Yeah. So, you know, cool. I mean, they mix him in a little bit with something that is in the story, you know. But ultimately he's just an original creation. So cool. So yeah, you know, if you're already used to horror or looking for something exciting or new or God forbid a good adaptation of this, it's just best to stay away. Now, a casual person, I'd be cautious to recommend it because again, I think most people knew that this existed even if they hadn't read it. So as far as that, they're gonna feel maybe like a little like I don't get it like a. So how are these stories relevant to anything? They feel crammed in. The elements of the book feel crammed in unnecessarily. So it might cause some unnecessary, you know, like conflict in the viewer. I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. Whatever. It's not confusing. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying, like, it just feels like, you know, like whatever. It's shoehorned. So, however, do I dissuade you from watching it? Nah. You know, fun time. Sure. Fun time. Let's talk about it. Anyway, if you don't want spoilers, probably go watch and then come back. If you know how he is, and we're just gonna chat about this bastard right here. Hit me with something good or bad. Don't care what it is.
I do like that it has that Halloween-y feel.
Yeah.
It feels kind of like an older movie.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I don't want to say 80s, but like one of those like calmer 80s horror movies where it's just kind of like a fun little time.
Yeah, I agree with that. There's definitely that particular atmosphere to it. I like that it's set in an era that allowed them to touch on like archetypal
Yeah.
Americana. So a lot of things can be covered by that. We glorify the 50s, but really the 50s as we see them, on screen were really the 60s, and this is kind of where they stick all these events in. I think that benefits the texture of the film quite well. I like that, and I like the cast of characters. They were really cool to be around. They were really interesting characters. They were likable. Again, nothing new,
yeah.
but they were very entertaining characters. I was interested in their story, and again, I thought this stuff put into the story distracted from them a little, but we'll get to that.
I think the movie is very like, and this is either going to be a plus or a negative for people. It's super tropey.
Yes.
Like it doesn't try anything new. It's just like, this is what you know.
Yeah.
And that's what we're making.
There are some jump scares in this. I know that's a big point of contention for people. We are, we're always behind a jump scare if it's properly built. I think there was some decent ones, like some tension was built before the jump scare was employed. And I think some were just like, okay, whatever. We knew that was coming. So there's that. And that kind of fits into the tropes here because it does feel, that's really the most disappointing part about having a jump scare is that it didn't even come with something new, you know what I'm saying? Or something particularly tasty in terms of the narrative or anything like that. I got to give props to the special effects. They look amazing. Some of the stuff looks fantastic. Some of the creatures are employed within the context of, or I should say within their own little scenes and sequences. They're employed quite effectively. The fat pale lady, I was going to say the jingly jangly man, but again, original. Some of those concepts.
Even the toe creature that was like brought in new.
The toe creature, again, tied into the story, but, at the same time, they take their liberties. So that stuff works effectively within the sequences, but again, it almost feels like a burden that you have to kind of mentally tie it into something that, again, it's not servicing very well. So,
just the fact that they had to, bring in a new creature and expand that story to have a creature says a lot.
Yeah, man. I feel like an actual scary stories to tell in the dark movie would have been better as just a series of really small shorts, maybe even animated, or CGI animated, that brought across the weird atmosphere, the visuals, and didn't necessarily have to have a narrative surrounding it. These don't, and they work in that way. That would have been like a more legit, loyal thing. So these two elements don't mesh very well. But again, independently, if you can disconnect yourself from the scary stories thing, which unfortunately the movie doesn't let you because they keep emphasizing this book thing, and sometimes you get just like maybe like a quarter of the story in the book, and it's not even.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like the Harold story in this is super disappointing.
Yeah,
it's like, I mean, the story is like super short in the book, but it does really feel shoehorned, like into the movie. Like he's there for a second.
Yeah, man. So they change the stories most of the time, and if they don't, the viewer that's not familiar with the stories only gets snippets of them as they're being written supernaturally in this book. So where's the story? The answer is the story is supposed to be this wraparound. So why not just make a new movie?
Yeah,
that's the weird thing. So this wraparound story follows these kids who, live in a town, small American town where there's this urban legend of this woman that, was supposed to be responsible for all these child deaths. And according to the legend, she told stories to them, scary stories, of course. And, they inadvertently wake up her angry spirit. Spoiler, her spirit is angry because, of course, she was innocent, blah, 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 a.k.a. The Ring and 1,000 other movies like that. And of course, now that she's an angry spirit, she disposes of people by writing them into stories. That just feels unnecessarily contrived.
Yeah.
Like, dude, come on. Just make an original movie. Just don't call it scary, so you don't have to fit this crap in there. You kind of have to live with that. sounds like I'm ragging on this bitch, but I did have fun watching the movie, you know. So yeah, like you, I enjoyed that spirit. I mean, that Halloweeny feel to it, and it goes beyond the fact that it starts on Halloween. It just
feels like a.
Yeah.
I do think that. I don't want to say that I would want this to be like a gags out movie, but I feel like it probably takes itself a little too serious.
A little bit, yeah.
Like if it had a little bit more of a fun feel, you know. Again, I'm not saying gags every second or anything, but if it had a little bit a looser, more fun with it, it wouldn't be that much of a complaint.
Right.
Because it does set itself up like this grandiose story it's telling, but really you've seen all this before.
Exactly.
So you're kind of like, it's nothing new.
Now, Del Toro himself, when he didn't direct this, of course, but Del Toro himself has kind of been down this road with the movie Crimson Peak. The excuse there for him to retread things that we've seen 1,000 times actually makes sense. He was making something that was an homage to gothic horror, as in gothic novels, not as in goths at clubs with big ass boots. So Crimson Peak works in that sense. Here you're hearkening to what? To a shitty child's book that granted is fun, but what's the payoff? There's no payoff. And
that's another thing. The book is very fun and it has this weird, goofy character.
So that's what it should have, like you say, that's what it should have harkened a little bit more to, like the kind of weird, loose, jocular spirit of the book. Instead, as you say, we have this serious affair that, while entertaining, I'm trying to say, while interesting to watch these characters because they are very likable and the actors are very good, ultimately, just at the end, you just go, been there, done that. You know, I'd like the score in this quite a bit. The cinematography is beautiful. It looks really nice. So that's cool. You're never gonna be, I don't think, ever gonna be like, that looks shitty. Effects, cool. You're never gonna be like, they look really nice, man. Some of them are obviously super CGI, but not in that Anaconda way. Yeah. More in that, like, well, it makes sense.
You're not gonna burst someone's face with spiders way.
Exactly. And they're so stylized, and I will grant them that in terms of giving the illusion of bringing kind of this style of drawing to life or painting to life that's in the book. They do bring that look to the screen in a way that's both its own thing and the book. So that's cool. Some of the horror set pieces are, again, I think independently of the film, they work better than just in the film, which again makes me go back to say, why didn't they just make something like this thing with disjointed stories? But whatever. Independently, I think some of them work really nice. Like the Red Room sequence was pretty cool. But when you think about it in the context of the story, it kind of loses some of the coolness. So whatever. But some of them kind of suck, like in parts. Like the big toe, all right. But it's set up so weakly, like, all right, so now we just have to buy this big toe bit with the least setup ever.
And again, it only works if you know about the story.
Exactly. And
otherwise it comes off kind
of weird. And that's the one that they give you the most story to, so you're like, damn. And and then it just ends in a way where you're like, all right. This movie ends in a setting up a potential sequel, which I understand is in the works. Okay. I'm not particularly excited about that. I felt that they kind of assumed too much because, there was a thing we saw. Yeah. Okay. So, give me something super positive about this movie. I mean, super negative about this movie. Or super positive. Fuck it. Whichever one. So we can wrap it up and give our final thoughts.
I think the biggest positive I would have to give is probably just seeing those creatures. They're cool. Even the new creature, I think that sequence was pretty rad. When he's trying to get into the thing, it was pretty effective.
Yeah, that was nice.
It's just neat to see that stuff. But that's like the biggest thing I can say that is the coolest thing about this movie is just seeing those things. And then at the end, it does kind of come with some disappointment because you're like, but they're not really fully fleshed out.
Exactly, man. I agree with that, and I'm gonna add this. It's both a super negative and a super positive, oddly enough. In one, it's the fact that I was actually interested in the stories of these kids. Despite again there being nothing new to it. The actors did such a good job, again, it's familiar ground that's nice to revisit.
Yeah.
And I was more interested in those stories being fleshed out a bit more than focusing on the scare or the quote unquote scary bits. You know, I could have done without some of the unnecessarily and don't get me wrong, it's not like they're super long and you're like, get this over with. But I could have done without some of the longer horror set pieces just to see more about these kids' stories. Because there was interesting stuff, especially with the two main characters, the Hispanic American kid and the Caucasian girl that's the writer in this story. So it would have been nice to see that a little bit more fleshed out, because honestly, that was the most interesting part of this movie. Which is weird because that's not supposed to be the most interesting part of this fucking movie. So, yes, that. Final thoughts, final score on a scale of 1 to 10 relative to its, ilk. Which, I guess, Halloween anthology, should have been anthology type flicks. I don't know. Give it to me, man.
I like it. It does sound like we hate it, but I actually enjoyed it, and it is a fun little movie. It is very... It's very, like, young person friendly, though.
Yeah.
Like, this does not feel like it's meant to be seen by adults.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because if it just comes short if you think about it in that way and look at it that way. But if it does feel like one of those kid movies that you watch like on TV or something. You're like, oh, that was really cool. Then you visit it later and you're like, yeah, that was alright. It's not. I didn't love it though. It's okay. I do think that a big disservice is shoveling the stories in there, but also not using them.
Yeah.
Because if they had at least expanded them to make them fit in and make them cool, then we wouldn't be complaining about that. The fact that they're just kind of there is what's the problem.
Yeah.
The effects are cool, so that's cool. I'll give it it's like a 6.
It's a movie we saw, and I did enjoy watching it. Would I buy this movie? No. Am I glad that I didn't watch it at the theater? Yes. I would have been very disappointed to pay for a ticket and then gotten this movie. That sounds horrible, but I would have, man. You know what I'm saying? I'd rather have a super shitty movie than a mediocre movie, So, take that into account. I have a feeling that there's going to be a group of people that watch this movie, that this movie is going to be important to them.
Yeah.
And that's cool. I'm glad it'll find an audience somewhere. Are we the audience for it? No. Honestly, no. And there's movies like that, man. Like, I'm sure like The Monster Squad. I'm sure to some people it's not a very entertaining movie, but to us it is. Although I'll say this, The Monster Squad, I'm trying to speak as non-subjectively as possible. It's a far better movie than this because it's very entertaining and it doesn't take itself too seriously.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest problem with this movie. It just doesn't have fun.
Yeah.
It doesn't have fun.
I agree, man. So there's a lot of positives in this, but overall they don't cohere into a wholeness, that I can call overwhelmingly positive. They're just kind of points that are good, but would have probably been better in another light. So, I have to give this like a 5.5. I don't really think anyone should go out of their way to watch it. But who knows? It might be...
Especially if you're a fan of the stories, because you're just going to be disappointed.
Yeah. In the end, if you're looking for an adaptation of this or something that elicits the same kind of weird, kooky responses as these stories, definitely not this movie. So, take that with a grain of salt, but that's what we're thinking here. I wish it would have been cooler, man. You know what I'm saying? I wish it would have been far better, or at the very least, a little bit more original.
Yeah.
At the very least, But it is what it is. Give it a look if you want. Tell us what you thought if you did. In the meantime, hit like, share, subscribe, and those notification buttons because we're out.